I had boarded the plane already feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The business deal I had just closed was huge, but it wasn't enough to make me forget the constant grind of being a black man in spaces where I wasn't always welcomed. When I entered the cabin, I had hoped for a quiet, peaceful flight where I could at least close my eyes for a few hours before landing in New York. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening. Your support means everything. But as I walked down the aisle, I felt eyes on me. I don't mean the casual glance that everyone gives when someone walks by. No, this was different. It was a stare, sharp, deliberate, almost mocking. And I wasn't imagining it. I could feel their eyes following me, taking in every inch of my dark velvet suit, the crisp white shirt that contrasted perfectly against the deep burgundy lining, and the polished designer shoes that I had bought during a recent trip to Milan. My suit wasn't ostentatious, but it was made for a man who knew his worth. But as I walked past the cabin crew, I could see the snickers, the quick glances exchanged between them, the murmurs, and that tight-lipped smile that never reached their eyes. "Look at this one of them whispered to another as I sat down in my seat. My stomach twisted in response, but I said nothing. I had been here before too many times. A black man in a sharp suit. It made them uncomfortable. It made them question whether I belonged. As I sank into my seat, I noticed that the whispers didn't stop. Even after the plane began taxiing toward the runway, I could still feel the tension in the air. The cabin crew was still laughing, talking among themselves, but I knew they were talking about me. I stared out the window, trying to block it out. I wasn't a stranger to this type of treatment. Growing up, I had been called names, I had been overlooked in professional spaces, and I had been made to feel like I didn't belong. But somehow, this felt different. It wasn't just casual racism. This was something deeper. It was a judgment based on my appearance, something that seemed so small, yet it carried so much weight. "Can I get you anything to drink, sir?" one of the flight attendants asked. She didn't meet my eyes, and her tone was overly polite, but there was an undercurrent of discomfort there. "No, thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated for a moment, then walked off without another word. As I sat there, I could hear the whispers. I knew exactly what they were saying, and I could feel the sting of their laughter. The woman had taken the opportunity to glance over at me a few times, and each time, her eyes would flick to my outfit, and I could see her rolling her eyes ever so slightly, as if she found me ridiculous. "Who does he think he is?" I could hear one of the cabin crew members muttering just loud enough for me to catch it. "It's like he's trying too hard." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I wanted to stand up, to shout at them, but I stayed in my seat, fuming quietly. The flight was just beginning, but I knew I couldn't let this go on for the next few hours. I had been calm for too long. The racism, the microaggressions, the quiet assumptions about my worth, my place in this world, it all added up. I tried to distract myself by pulling out my phone and going over the details of my next business meeting, but the laughter in the background was still there. Every now and then, I'd glance at the cabin crew, and I could see them whispering to each other, making exaggerated gestures. I knew it was directed at me, but I wasn't going to let them win. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stood up. My legs were stiff, my blood was boiling, but I knew I couldn't let this moment pass without saying something. As I made my way toward the front of the plane, I could feel the eyes of every passenger on me. I wasn't just walking to the bathroom. No, I was walking to confront the people who had been laughing at me. When I reached the galley where the crew was stationed, I stood still for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The laughter stopped immediately, and all eyes were on me. "Everything all right, sir?" one of the attendants asked, her voice sweet, but I could see the nervous twitch in her hands as she fiddled with the cart. "No, actually, everything's not all right," I said, my voice low but firm. I couldn't help but overhear the conversation you all were having. Their faces immediately froze, but I could tell none of them were truly sorry. They were just trying to play it off, pretending they hadn't just spent the last hour making fun of me. Is there a problem with my outfit? I asked, my words sharp. Do you think I'm trying too hard? There was a long silence before one of them, a younger woman with blonde hair, cleared her throat awkwardly. Sir, I apologize if anything I said made you uncomfortable, she said, her voice shaky. It wasn't intended that way. I could feel my blood pressure rising. You know, I continued, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. But what I'm really tired of is people thinking that I don't belong just because of how I look, how I dress. Do you understand how that feels? Her face flushed, and she nodded. But I could see she was still avoiding my gaze, looking anywhere but at me. Look, I said, my voice softer but still carrying the weight of my frustration. I'm not asking for a red carpet treatment, but I won't be laughed at either. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I deserve to be treated with respect no matter what I'm wearing. She didn't answer immediately, and for a moment, the tension in the air was palpable. But then, I did something I had never done before. I'll be on the phone with Greg in a few minutes, I said, almost casually. You know Greg, right? The CEO of this airline? Yeah, he and I are quite familiar. We've talked a few times. Funny how I didn't see him on the flight today. But I'm sure he'd be interested to hear about how his crew has been treating passengers. That did it. Suddenly, the entire galley went quiet. The moment I mentioned the CEO's name, the energy in the room shifted. The woman stammered an apology again, and the rest of the crew looked visibly uncomfortable. I'm sorry, sir, the blonde attendant said, now looking me in the eye. We didn't mean to disrespect you. It was just, well, it's just that we don't often see people dressed like you. It caught us off guard. I nodded, not entirely convinced by her explanation, but I appreciated the attempt. It's fine, but this kind of thing should never happen again, I said before turning to leave. As I walked back to my seat, I could feel the eyes on me once more, but this time it was different. There was no laughter. There was no judgment. I sat down and pulled out my phone, feeling the vibration of an incoming message. It was from Greg, the CEO. His message was brief but direct. I heard what happened. I'd like to speak with you personally. Let's make sure this is addressed. You deserve better. For the rest of the flight, I sat in peace. And when the plane landed, I felt a sense of vindication not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever felt small, overlooked, or judged for no reason other than the color of their skin, the way they dressed, or where they came from. As I walked out of the airport, ready to head to my next meeting, I realized that it wasn't just about the CEO's call or the apology from the flight attendants. It was about the realization that sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't just change your own life, it makes the world a little bit better for those who will come after you.